see the tension sort of going on, and before you know it, you have. So you want to be attentive to that in terms of a facilitator. And you are working with your co-facilitator always to make sure that those things are kept under control. But the goal is not to make sure that, as you actually expressed, the goal is not to have anger. Anger is important. The goal is also not to have chaos, so that we can have a productive dialogue. Yeah, so let's go ahead and thank you so much. I think that that was a great discussion. Let me open up a topic so we can actually have a little discussion about an intergroup issue that is happening in the United States contemporarily. It's this idea of race relations in America. And I hear many people talk about how race relations in America are actually getting worse. We haven't made any kind of improvement, and things are really, really, really getting worse. And they point to so many examples nowadays as proof of that things are not improving and that we're going backward. On the other hand, other people say that, no, we've made some improvement. Yeah, we've got some work to do, but we have made some large strides regarding intergroup relations around race. What I want to do is I want to ask a question, is what do you think, where are we at in terms of the status of race relations in America? What are your thoughts? Who wants to go?
Can you ask the question one more time?
There's this idea that race relations in America are getting worse, and that we're going backwards. That's one train of thought. The other train of thought is that no, we've made some tremendous improvements and we're making more improvements. We've got some stuff to work on, but for the most part, we've moved ahead quite a bit. So I just want to get an idea, a sense from all of you. What are your opinions on with respect to those issues? Yes.
I think it depends on where people are. I mean, I've talked to some people who are in some pretty rural, isolated places and very pro-Trump and so forth, and they don't interact with anybody of any different race besides their white neighbors. And so I wouldn't say they've gone backwards, but they certainly haven't moved forward. And then, you know, there's my daughter, you know, she goes to school in one of the most diverse places in the country. And it's just amazing, and it's beautiful, and there's many places in America that are like that.
So would you say that in the example that you gave, that it's lack of interaction that actually...
That's what I feel.
Okay. Other thoughts?
It's funny, I have a different view on that. I've noticed, from my perspective, more issues coming up within within metro communities, more issues about race. And that's ironic, but that's where diversity is in metro areas, like riots, protests, clashes happening there in metro areas, from my perspective. And why? I don't know.
Yes.
I understand both, and I don't have disagreement with either. I don't think we've, I guess it depends what we're comparing to, what we're looking at as, if it's progress or regression. If we're talking about early 20th century, sure, we've made progress, and a lot of that has just come from having larger populations and more mixed populations to have the exposure. I don't think we're necessarily doing better or worse. I just think it's obvious. We're in a culture of not keeping quiet, of not following those polite, unspoken rules, the sandwiches and such, where people are speaking up and demanding respect and demanding to be acknowledged and recognized. And we're grappling, I think, the pushback or the conservatism comes from the fear of having to acknowledge. I think America doesn't see itself as a colonial country and has not rectified that image and doesn't want to hear it, doesn't want to be called to task.
Okay. Yes.
I would like to piggyback. Yes, one point of reference, if we want to go all the way back into, I mean, it should be different. We have progressed, well, we have progressed in time, but when you think back generationally,
Mhm.
I know for myself, I'm just 2 generations from my grandparents who were born in the thirties, who experienced racism on a very high level, which was more open during that time, and 1 generation away from my mother who went through the civil rights era and had to integrate a school that she didn't want to go to and had to work hard to just get a B, or, you know, not being served ice cream and not understanding why, because she didn't know she had to go to the back of the ice cream truck. And so, and for me, in my generation, I went to predominantly white schools, and having the different moms at our program, our school program, look at my mom differently and treat her differently because I guess she wasn't the stereotypical black woman because she was a professional. She worked out at that time in Donna Douglas, so when she came to pick me up, you know, she was dressed professionally, and we speak, you know, as people say, you know, not black, you know, I guess because we have a vocabulary and people are used to stereotypical ways of people and how they should interact. And so when you look at the time period, people assume because we are in the 21st century and we're in 2019, of course, yes, but if you look back generationally, we still have a lot to go, a lot further to go, because those generations are still alive and are still, how should I say this, are still instilling those values onto their children and into their grandchildren, into their great-grandchildren. So it becomes more of a generational issue because that viewpoint is being passed down as opposed to the time that we're in.
Yes.
I do think it has a lot to do with the area of the country because I'm from Connecticut, and I went to one of the 3 racially integrated schools in Connecticut. Most of Connecticut is rural, or suburban, white, or completely people of color in the city. And so I had a very unique experience. And my sister, who dated a black man in the 80s, went to college in University of North Carolina in Greensboro. And she said that if she had revealed that to her, to anybody when she was there, she would have been ostracized. And so that is very location specific, these kinds of behaviors. And, you know, whereas I was in Connecticut and, you know, my mom's boss was a professional black woman, and one of my best friends is black. I've got a godson who I still take care of in Connecticut, and it's just, I just think I have such a different experience from other people who grew up in Connecticut in different schools, and such a different experience from people in the South, and even in the South Bay. There are ethnically diverse schools, and there are very segregated schools. So everybody's gonna have a different experience based on that, and that's my feeling. And I do agree that metro areas can have a lot of racism, but there are highly segregated areas of metro areas too, and I think there's division within that, and that's where that comes from.
Yes.
About 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to do some work with the Peace Builders program in Compton. And I met a young man, African-American young man. And he with his partner was having a baby. And my baby grew out a lot of stuff. And I said, you know, I've got quite a bit of stuff to pass on to you. Would you come on out? We live up on the hill. And I said, come pick it up. And I have a whole bunch of stuff, clothes and toys and all kinds of goodies. And so he did. And he shared with me, I'll never forget this in that moment in time, that he was afraid. He was afraid to have traveled from Compton up to my home where he was welcome. And I never even thought about how uncomfortable he was. And I said, what if he, because he said, I'm afraid. Because he was looking around like this. And I didn't get it. And I said, what are you afraid of? And he said, I don't know, somebody's gonna think I don't belong here. So
So is this sense, and what could I have done in that moment, I offered him some tea, it's like, how can I make you comfortable, but he said, I need to get home, I need to get out. So it's, I think today, 20 years later, I feel things have gotten worse, with what we hear in the media, how the media portrays that what's going on with law enforcement and young black men being, wearing hoodies and being shot and not having weapons, is like, that is not okay with me. And I'm still even sharing this. I was like, I don't know what to do about that, other than to speak out and protest.
Let me stop you there for a second. Something you said that I wanted to follow up on. When you found out that the young man was afraid, how did that make you feel?
Kind of afraid in the moment also. It's like, what are you afraid? I should be afraid too. God forbid, the only time somebody drove up or somebody called the police saying that person doesn't belong there, and they're arriving at my home, I would be mortified.
Some of you have actually talked about this element of time, right, and also geography. Right? What would you say to me if I were to tell you, make America great again? Let's go back to the 1960s or even before, when America was great. If I were to make that kind of a comment, what would you say to me? What comes to mind?
America is great. I know it's angry.
Maybe we need to have a dialogue about what does it mean for America to be great?
Elaborate on that. What is that?
Well, right now you say, make America great again. It's like a political flashpoint around Trump. It's very, you can take it as a very one-dimensional thing. And you're saying, well, let's go back to 1960s, or what era you want to go back to. No era is perfect. And so when you're talking about, let's go back to that era when America was great, well, what was great about it that you wanted to return to? And it wasn't perfect, and not everybody's going to agree that, certainly there are aspects of America and respects in which we have greatness, but it's not across the board. So what do we mean by that? And so what elements of greatness are going to be valuable to everybody that we want to carry forward? And what are the things that maybe aren't so great right now that we want to make better? And what does it mean? What would it mean to us now for America to be great? Define, what does it mean for us to be great?
So,
And make it more, not so one-dimensional.
so when I make that kind of statement, make America great again, let's go back to the 60s, what do you think I might be talking about? Things were great, let's go back to before the 1960s.
I immediately thought of what you were saying and how, I don't remember what it was, maybe it was Yesterday in Dialogue or something that they were talking about, or I saw it on TV or on a website, that, the Ku Klux Klan was actually had their meetings at a college, and that was in the 80s. And I was like, whoa, that's far too recent. And so when you say go back to the 60s when things were great, I immediately thought, well, if you're talking about, we didn't have the violence on TV, and we didn't have school shootings, and, we had, people and families were together and things like that, that maybe people cared more about values. But then when I think about the black experience in that time and how horrible that was, because I was alive. And I remember the late 60s, I moved from the East Coast, fully integrated, and I moved to El Segundo, of all places, right? And everybody was white, and I was like, where the heck am I? Like, what is this, right? And I wasn't used to that, because I came from New York, New Jersey, and everybody was there. And I was like, everyone's white. And then two black kids moved into town, and I was like, yay, black kids, I feel more comfortable. And I immediately became their friends, and then I had people shun me, because, why are you hanging out with them? Why wouldn't I, nobody else is, so, happy to see them, because I feel more imagining how things were good. And I think housewives of the sixties tried to portray, you know, the housewife is, you know, the house is clean and dinner's done and the man goes to work and, you know, all these little things that we saw on TV shows, the white experience of TV shows. And so I think that's where that making it great again, like we didn't have students who were bringing guns to school and shooting people up and that nobody, you know, like you're desensitized to violence and stuff like that. So I think that's
I just think there was violence in schools, and I don't know if you held it in Knife Point in my hometown, in a school in the sixties. I just think that, you know, it's publicized that there's shootings now because they're in white schools, and that you hear about the black kid in the hoodie now. Now it's on TV, and it was happening. It's not like it's new. It's not like it is getting worse. It's just we're seeing it more on TV. I mean, that's.
Those of you who haven't commented, did you hear from some of those of you who haven't made a comment about any of these issues?
Well, my experience, you know, I was raised here in LA, and I've encountered a diverse group of people from the time I was a little kid. So my experience has been, I think, pretty diverse and healthy in that way. In the deaf culture, deaf people are in every race, and I hang out with deaf people, so I met, you know, a lot of people in that environment. And the first thing is we feel that we can relate if we're both deaf. I think, you know, that if we're both deaf, that's primary aside from race. Race isn't that much of a factor. But when you talk about the sixties, what comes to my mind, just me personally, is how American culture has really changed so much from that time, since that time. I would say a conservative or purist view to open, very, very open. And what I'm referring to specifically is like sexual freedom, drugs, you know, just, you know, in the sixties was open, free love, you know. Before that time, people were more concerned about morals, and now where are they? So, I come from a conservative background, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. And I am very conservative, I'm still that way, and I'm going to change that way. I have spiritual beliefs that I wish to maintain that are strongly related to moral values when it comes to God, not when it comes to people. So for me, I feel it's a shame that things are not valued, some things are not valued like they were before. So that's what comes to mind when I think about prior to the sixties. But when it comes to people, I am, you know, I have good friends that are of different races and of different situations. So I'm more concerned about moral issues. That's the changes in morals bothers me more.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes.
For me, when I hear the Make America Great, it the same thing makes me kind of like, oh, trigger. Because I think it's such a general statement on what greatness is, and in so many different levels on how you can measure it. As a Black woman, I was born in the 70s, so when I remember the stories from my parents, I think when I think of the 60s, I think of more of an awareness, because we've had all these court issues and battles and going, and people are more, not only more aware, but willing to take a stance on issues that had already oh no, we're gonna fight this, we're gonna stand for this. And so, yes, the sixties were great in that way, in which it made people feel more, to me, I think of it, people being more open with their voice and being able to express themselves and saying, no, I don't agree with this, and going against what the norm was during that time. But but in being Black, it's kind of a interesting situation to say, make it great again, considering we're still in this metamorphosis of growth. And so, yeah, it was okay. But you still have the civil rights issue during that time. So the Black community, yes, was stronger because we had to be stronger because it was so much opposition. We came together to create more because we were all that we had. But the great again is kind of a catch-22 when you're speaking upon different minorities and what that 60s looked like for them and for their people.
Well, thank you so much. We've come to the end of 2 hours of dialogue at first. I really enjoyed the way that we actually discussed the issue. We're gonna be here for another 5 weeks. So to close off today's group, I'd like for us to go around the room and say one word that actually describes how you're feeling right now about the dialogue that we had. Why don't I start? I'm excited. That's fine.
Engaged.
Curious. Optimistic. I'm greatly interested.
Stimulated?
Educated.
Hopeful. We're hopefully curious. Heavy.
Grateful.
Thank you so much. Let me pass out the evaluations, the daily evaluations. And the daily evaluations contain 3 things. One is what I liked about today's dialogue, what I didn't like about today's dialogue, what I would like to talk about next week. You fill it out, you give it back to me, and then co-facilitators, we take a look at those for the following. Thank you so much, and we will meet next week. Okay. Before we take a break, let's do a little processing. What do you think? Ready to go, any feedback as a facilitator, things that I may have done that you like, things that you don't like, anything? You were gonna say something.
Yeah, I didn't say much because I know the history of racism somewhat, but I don't have intimate connection with it.
Okay.
Do I have like 5 minutes to say about this? I came from communist country.
Okay.
I escaped communism to communist country, and I was Chinese, so now I'm American. And I always feel America is great. But when I hear other people saying all these issues, I understand. But I don't have that intimate connection like Maida. But I understand, my first knowledge about Black suffering was from the book of Ruth. That's when I was in college, and Ruth was translated into Chinese, and I was in college. And at that time, the feeling was the Black people are the proletarian. What was the word? You know, the Marxist theory, and they're our friends. And so when I came to this country, I think I have always been staying in academia. My husband is academia. Our kids are raised in a neighborhood was kind of mixed. But I never thought. Yesterday someone said, Papa, who said what? He said, you don't know how hard it is to raise 2 kids of colors. Those words never came to my mind when I was raising my 2 children. I just realized I raised 2 kids of colors. It's just like color doesn't seem to be when color came home, when my daughter told me when she was in middle school, someone called her chink. But when we were raising our kids, color was never discussed. So I'm kind of, I don't know how to say it, and it's just never, I have friends of all colors. And I have a lot of great students I'm very close to, they're of all different colors. So my experience is very different. And to me, when you say America is great, you talk about 50s, and I didn't know much about it. I know McCarthyism, I know the civil rights issues, but it's less intimate. To me, America has always been great, right? The fact that we can sit here and talk about these things and demonstrate America is indeed great. Because what I refer to is that in China, such discussion will be forbidden. There's no way you'll have this kind of discussion. So for that, I think I'm grateful. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I think.
That,
So I do
one
have
of-
a different
one of
perspective.
the things that I like about the dialogue is the multiple perspectives. And hopefully during the period of the 6 weeks that you would actually speak up and say that, because that informs the discussion that we're having, right? International students, for example, are just perfect for dialogues because they have a totally different experience than those of us. Sometimes we're arguing about race and then students from other countries are like, what are you talking about? We've got class issues, right? And of course, those of us who live in the US are like, well, I never thought about that. Well, this is the idea, is that the students walk away and say, I had never thought about that, then you've done your job, right? So this is why it's important to actually get everybody to talk. Other things that you saw, dynamics, yes?
I just wanted to respond to June. I appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable at the end of this time and to share your perspective, and to be here from the math department is very important for our facilitating group development at college. And I think one of the things that you spoke about is an area where I've been doing a lot of reading and a lot of thinking as a white person. So I read a book over the last couple of months called White Fragility, which is written by a white anti-racist woman. And then I read another book called A Race is a Nice Thing to Have by a black psychologist named Janet Helms. And both of these books speak to kind of what you're mentioning, which is that each of us in this representative group experience race differently in the United States. I mentioned yesterday that it was the experience of my multiracial children that really brought me into this work a couple of years ago in a way that I was not prepared. My children are Asian, Caucasian. They could pass as white. I had never thought about the fact they both identify very strongly with their Asian heritage, both racially and culturally. I wasn't prepared for them to bring home racism and anti-Semitism in first grade, first and second grade. That was like a wake-up call to me. Whoa, my children are going to move through these United States of America differently than their mom, who's white, and differently from their dad, who is a new first-generation Japanese immigrant. It's just a different experience. So thank you for your willingness to share honestly